I entered Swiss X1 and yeah, and I lost in top cut basically because game one my opponent he basically beat me with he mind controlled my guy and then he goes Shadow Fusion and then he makes second Alga and then he attacks for damage and then he L shadows for more damage and then the next turn the next turn after he just enemy controls my guy and I'm dead pretty much. In game two, I just bricked 4 floodgates and a sacrifice, and my opponent played deck lockdown, right? So, and then I drew MST the next turn, and then I was like, wow, I can't even MST my own sacrifice search. So that was kind of awkward. So yeah, but overall, I did pretty well. So yeah.
Cool. Mind if we see your deck?
Yeah, sure. So the monsters, it's just 3 scout. This guy. I won't go into too much detail with this guy because it's really self-explanatory. He searches for any card, any Qliphort card, spell, monster, trap, and you just have to, like, you play 3, there's no doubt about it. 3 disc. There are some lists where, like, they only play 2 disc, and I think that's completely incorrect because, should we just, that's kind of, okay, so back to what I was saying. Had some builds where they don't play 3 disc, which and the reason why you play 3 disc is because disc is a 1 scale, and that's really important because there are times when like you just like all your carriers might be like dead or something, and then you just have like maybe you've used all your discs or something. Like it's not situational, but it comes up really often, and in that situation, like the 3rd disc really helps in letting you continue to pendulum summon and go off and stuff. So that's good. So yeah, and then 3 carriers. Carrier is like he's one of the best Qliphorts besides Scout, basically. Carrier, just when you sack Carrier, you can bounce any monster, and that's really important in this format because you can it easily outcards like Dante primarily. Like this card is extremely important in the Burning Abyss matchup against decks like Shadows and stuff. They set monsters or they have like a massive like fusion, like they have Shekinah Construct. This also just outs it. And it just helps you OTK and it just promotes really degenerate players, but yeah. So play 2 Helix. 2 Helix because 3 Helix gets a bit cloggy. The main reason is Helix is a 9 scale like Scout, so you usually don't have Helix in the Pendulum Zone unlike Disc and Carrier. And so and also the ability to pop Spell and Trap isn't really that relevant since everything is chainable with this format anyway. There's like no slow traps. So you only play 2 Helix because it's subpar at 3. 2 Trampolinks. So 2 Trampolinks. This card is I was really iffy about running this card at first because it just seemed really unnecessary and inconsistent because it's a card where like if you don't have the Scout to combo with it, it's really awkward. But the reason I ended up playing it was because in matchups where you really need to just go for game and just OTK your opponent, such as like against Denko dolls or like the mirror match, basically, you really need the Trampolinks to get you that extra search off Scout. Basically, it makes a difference between whether you winning the game or losing the game. And with Trampolinks, I usually just board it out game 2 and 3 against decks like Burning Abyss or even Shadow, because they usually start like Fairy Winds and stuff. So it becomes dead really often game 2 and 3. So I pretty much always sided out, and I played 1 Shell. And the reason you play Shell is because Shell is a piercer firstly. So being able to pierce for damage can be it can come up and it can be really important. Like it can be the difference between winning and losing. And also Shell, unlike Disc, like if you're under emptiness and then you need to like tribute for something, like Shell is much better than Disc because obviously if you're under emptiness you can't go tribute for Disc and activate Disc effect because there's an emptiness on field. Whereas if you're in Shell, you still get to attack twice with Shell, and plus they all have like all the Qliphorts besides Scout obviously, they all have the effect where if normal summoned, they're unaffected by monster effects whose level of rank is lower than themselves, and like Shell being level 8 is really critical because it makes him immune to cards like Arcanine Michael, and stuff like Virgil as well. Like it's very big, and it's a similar case with Disc, but because Disc is only level 7, things like Black Rose or like Arcanine Magician again can still out the Disc, whereas with Shell they can't destroy it. And yeah, those are all the monsters I played. I didn't play Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon because I feel the card is absolutely terrible. And the reason why is because Odd Eyes basically forces you to skip your turn. Like it's it's similar to the problem with like Gear Gear armor back when Gear Gear were a thing. Like with Gear Gear, you would often, like when you're going first, you would basically go second because you set the armor, and if you go second, well, you're going fourth because you set the armor and you had to wait another turn. Same issue with Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, because you go first, well, you search, but you can't do anything with Scout, so you're effectively going second when you go first. And when you go second, you're effectively going fourth because you have to wait 2 turns before you can actually use that Scout. And so yeah, I just felt the card was really subpar. Onto the spells, I played 3 Sacrifice. This card is an absolute staple in this deck. It's so important. Basically, it promotes all of your degenerate plays with both Disc and Shell, and basically, in a nutshell, what it does is that it protects your monster from battle, it gives them more attack, it makes it count as 2 tributes, which is it's huge, it's just so important. And also, it has the added benefit of floating. So, right, so Sacrifice is really important because basically Sacrifice has the benefit of allowing your monsters to float in that, so like, not only are they immune to destruction, if your opponent somehow manages to like blow like your monster up by like a card effect or something, like Sacrifice is going to float and it's going to get you another one of these, so it gets another Scout, well, like any of these other cards, but you usually get like Scout or something. And basically the reason it's so good is because like game 2 and 3, when they side in cards like Fairy Wind or like against like Burning Abyss where they have Fire like and shit, Sacrifice is really strong because board clears that you would usually completely like demolish your board well, they're effective, but they're not as effective because you're still floating the Scout off the Sacrifice, which means you can still basically go off. And yeah, and it's because of like these, like all those reasons that just make Sacrifice such an incredible card. And then for the, let's see, so just move on to the other 3 holes. Just give me a moment. So I played 3 Upstart Goblin because, so there are some lists which don't run 3 Upstart, which run Upstart, which I don't think is correct, because the thing is, with a deck like this, the deck is meant to be played extremely aggressively. Like, you're meant to just pendulum summon a crap ton of monsters, clear their board, and kill them. And so Upstart Goblin helps you get to helps you get to Scout, which is like, this is essentially Scout deck. Like, Scout does everything for you. And so Upstart Goblin helps to get Scout, and when comboed with this card Summoner Art, which also searches Scout, you're essentially, like, you can think of this deck as a 34 card deck, because these 6 cards all get another card instantly. So it's a really, really fast deck. And when you add in all the other cards that search, such as Sacrifice or the 3 Pot of Duality that I ran, you just have a deck that is extremely consistent. Like throughout over the course of the 10 rounds, I think I bricked like a total of like twice out of like, I think it was twice out of the 30 games I played. So this deck is just extremely consistent, and yeah. And the reason I played 3 Duality over 2 Duality is just because it's a larger event. Like if this was like a smaller event and I didn't have to play as many rounds, I might just go 2 Duality. But in a really large event like this, where you're gonna brick at one stage, you want your deck to be as consistent as possible. And Duality is very important because Duality digs for cards such like mainly Summoner Art and Scout. So it just digs for cards that you need. But sometimes Duality can also be used to dig for other answers like one-offs, so I'll go into that later. But and then I also played 3 MST because this is essentially an OTK deck. You want to be clearing back row, and also in the mirror match, it's really important because you want to kill their Scout. You don't want their stuff to resolve. And even though everything's chainable right now, it doesn't mean that you don't play MST just because you're technically negging 1. MST is still really important because you're forcing out back row at a point where it's not optimal for your opponent to play it. So. Yeah, MST is just absolutely staple. I wouldn't play any less than 3 in this format at least. And then one-offs I played 1 Raigeki because even though like literally everything is a float in this format, like the Qliphorts, they all float on top of the extra deck. Burning Abyss just float for days, and Shadows float as well. I still feel Raigeki is extremely, it's still a really good card to run because Raigeki can mean the difference between you being able to push for game, it can also like help out really, like it can help out like boards that you wouldn't normally be able to like get rid of anyway. Like let's say your opponent like opened like double Dante's at Fire Lake. If you have Raigeki, that's just an instant out, whereas you would have lost that game otherwise. And so Raigeki is kind of necessary. I do side it out sometimes, it's mainly when I'm going first because the card isn't as optimal going first. You want something else that you can use on turn 1. The next one is Book of Moon. Book of Moon is interesting because it's realistically only optimal against Burning Abyss. It's kind of average against every other matchup. And the reason being is that against like Qliphorts, stopping 1 monster doesn't really do anything. And against Shadow, like booking their monsters really isn't really effective because like firstly if you're booking a normal, like if you're booking like one of the normal shadow effect monsters, like that, like you're doing something wrong already because you're gonna let him trigger another effect unless it's like the difference between like you dying or not. It's obvious, it's usually the wrong move. And like even booking something like a construct or like a, I don't know, like window or something, actually, no, that's not relevant, like just something like a construct because they only make a construct now. Like the other ones are really rare that you see the other El Shadows, so even in that scenario, Book of Moon doesn't do much because in Qliphorts, your monsters float anyway, so protecting your monsters doesn't matter, and the only thing it's really good for is saving life. And so yeah, I've probably made books sound like a really bad card, but when it really isn't. So like the reason this card is run is because in the Burning Abyss matchup, it's really, really important because let's say you go first and you set Book of Moon. In this scenario, Book of Moon is almost like Book of Moon is better than Vanity's Emptiness because like they can't out Book of Moon with cards like with trainable cards like MST and stuff. Because let's say they go, let's say they just go special from hand, and then you just say okay, they special another one from hand. You just Book of Moon one of their monsters, and you brick the other one because it just dies instantly. Because they obviously don't control Burning Abyss monster anymore. Like they don't control like only Burning Abyss monsters anymore. And even if they go like tour guide from the underworld, get a guy, you just Book them in the guy they got, and the tour guide itself is locking them down as well. So I just feel book is important because it helps. Oh, sorry, this just realized, yeah. And so it helps the Burning Abyss matchup a lot, which is probably this deck's hardest matchup. So it helps fix that matchup. And so furthermore, I played one Laser Clip. This card it's interesting because this card can be really bad in some scenarios and it can be really ridiculous in other scenarios. Basically, Laser Clip is played because Laser Clip wins you the Shadow matchup and it also wins you the Mirror match. And the reason is because obviously Laser Clip lets you summon again. It's kind of like a Fire Formation Tensu, and that's really big because let's just say you resolve like a disc, right? You go Laser Clip, and then you just go you go disc, you go double carrier, and then you go Laser Clip, you go disc again, you sack both carriers, you bounce the whole board, you just summon more guys and you kill them. And it comes up quite a bit. And also a very interesting play with Laser Clip is that you can basically you can go double scout, and then you get a helix. You get a helix on the field, and then you get a sacrifice equipped to it, and then you summon a disc over the helix, and then use the helix to pop your own scout, and then I missed the part of the combo. Basically, you would play Laser Clip to normal summon the Helix, and then you would normal summon for turn by attributing the Helix. And basically, what this lets you do is that because the sacrifice also got sent to the grave, you can search a 1 scale and then use Helix's effect to pop the second scout that you activated, and then basically from there you can complete your scale and you can just summon a crap ton of people, like crap ton of Qliphorts, and you can just OTK your opponent out of nowhere, and that's just really, really strong. And so yeah, I actually did that exact combo to my round 9 opponent who was playing Shadows, and basically what he did was he just set a Shadow and he passed, and I was like, okay, I just did the whole combo and killed him turn 1. So yeah, it's really nutty and stupid. Finally for spells, yeah, this deck runs a lot of spells. I believe my count was like 20 spells, and the final 2 spells I played was Night Beam because well, you don't really want to play. Firstly, I didn't play 3 Night Beam as some lists did because the thing with Night Beam is that like when you're playing 3 Night Beam and 3 MST, you're almost playing too much spell trap removal in that like your deck just starts to lose its consistency, and like you don't really play power, like you don't have as many power cards, you just have a lot of 1-for-1s, and the issue with that is that like you can easily lose some games just because you weren't able to like make the power plays. But Night Beam is extremely important because Night Beam in a format where literally everything is chainable, Night Beam is absolutely huge because let's say against like the Shadow matchup, they set 1 and pass, like, and that one card's like an El Shadow fusion, and you just go standby phase. Do you have anything? And they're like no, and then you just play Night Beam, and they can't chain it, so they pretty much lose from there because you can just OTK them. And it's similar in the Burning Abyss matchup where each can just kill Fire Lake for you. Like let's say you have a board, they set Fire Lake, they're pretty like, and they try to be greedy, and they wait for you to activate Scout. You can just go, do you have anything in standby? And the guy goes no, and then you just go okay, Night Beam. And if it's like 1 back row, then he's screwed. But if it's multiple back row, then maybe it's like there's always variance there, but there's always the chance that you can hit the Fire Lake off that. And in that case, it's just an absolute blowout because you just went after that. The traps, I play very few traps in this deck because I just feel like playing traps in this deck isn't correct, because this is a very aggressive deck. I don't want to be playing at like a slower pace, because Burning Abyss just does it so much better. Like, if I wanted to play a slow control deck, I'd be playing Burning Abyss without a doubt. Like, this is a very, very aggressive deck. It's probably the most aggressive deck in the format, I would argue. Like, Denko Dolls is really, really aggressive too, but I feel that this deck is still a bit more aggressive. So the traps, I only play 3 skill drain, and the reason you play 3 skill drain is because when you go into a really large event that's like 800 more people, you're gonna expect to face like Rogue in the early rounds. And skill drain just absolutely wins that matchup. I only verse 1 Rogue, but it does come up, and like skill drain is just really strong. And even against the other 2 of the big 3, skill drain is still really strong card, because when you think about it, so this card absolutely destroys shadows, because they can't activate the flip effects, they can't activate construct, they can't go math, they can't use a lot of the cards that make the deck good. And it also outs Denko Sekka, because you can just go set a bunch of back row and go standby phase, skill drain, and they can't Denko Sekka you, and that's actually really, really huge. And also, in the Burning Abyss matchup, skill drain it's not as optimal, but it is still a good card, because the reason being is because of tour guide from the underworld, because you can they go tour guide, you just skill drain the tour guide, and even if they have like another monster to special and make something, like, it doesn't really matter what they make. Like, there is the argument that, hey, they can make Acid Golem without a downside, but like, that doesn't really matter, because sorry about that. That doesn't really matter, because when skill drain's on the board, your discs and like your shells are all 2800, and you have sacrifice to boost them up to 31. So the Acid Golem is just completely irrelevant. And furthermore, skill drain is also really big because in that matchup, because it makes Dante at 1000 attack, like, instead of the 25 boosted up, which basically means that they can't really effectively make pushes, and it also stops them from going Virgil to spin cards. So overall, skill drain is good in that matchup, but it's not as good as like Shadow Prisoning Mirror, but skill drain is still really strong in that matchup. And finally, skill drain also has the added benefit of allowing you to develop your own board rather than just simply floodgating your opponent, as cards like Vanity's Emptiness or like Vanity's Emptiness or Shadow Mirror do. They just, like, cards like that just stop your opponent. But the thing is, in this deck, skill drain is also helping yourself. Like, it's making your discs and your shells 2800 normal summons, your carriers and helixes are 2400 normal summons. So basically, once you flip skill drain, you basically just go into helmet beatdown mode, and you just keep attacking with really high attack monsters. Your opponent can't really do anything about it. The last 3 traps, I played 2 Emptiness. I didn't play 3 because I felt that this Emptiness is only optimal if you're going first. It's really suboptimal going second usually, and the reason being is because Shadows. It's best against Shadows, because Shadows usually let you go second now, because go first now, because the deck is focused more around OTKing, so Emptiness is really good in that matchup. But the thing is that against like Burning Abyss, if you're going second, Emptiness is really awkward, because they usually just go double Dante if they can, and so like, especially like if they know you're playing Qliphort, they're just gonna go, oh, double Dante is a fire. Like at that stage, your Emptiness is just a dead card and doesn't do anything. Obviously, if you're going first, you can Emptiness things like Tour Guide, the special summons from hand. That's really good, right? But going second, yeah, the card is actually very suboptimal, and that's why I didn't want to be playing 3, because there's always that luck. Like, I'm not gonna, I don't know if I'm gonna win the Dyro every game, so I don't wanna make my deck so reliant on the Dyro when it's already very reliant on the Dyro. Like, this deck really wants to be going first, unless you're versing Chaos Shadows, then I guess you want to be going second. But yeah, and one more interesting thing about Emptiness in this deck is that it's comparable to Roll Oppression, because since the monsters go to the top of the extra deck when they die, usually, the Emptiness stays on the field. So Emptiness in the right situations is absurdly overpowered in this deck. But like I said, once again, it goes down to the problem of you having to open Emptiness and go first for it to be optimal. The last card I played in the main was Climate Change, and this card was absolutely insane. Like, I've won so many games of this over the past 2 days. Basically, what it does is that it's kind of like, it's comparable to Salvage, and that lets you add back cards, but it's so much more in this deck. Like, Climate Change, basically, you can add up to 3 face-up cards from your from your extra deck. And the reason this is so good is because matchups like Burning Abyss and even like shadows, like artifact shadows and stuff. They're gonna have cards they're gonna have answers for scout. Like you can't just play scout. You can't just like play scout into like 4 back row or like 3 back row and expect it to resolve. And that's what climate change comes in hand. Like that's where climate change comes in. Basically, what climate change lets you do is it lets you recklessly throw away your scouts. Like your opponent's just gonna have answer, and you're just like, okay, that's fine. You set climate change. You just climate change back all the scouts that have been destroyed, and like you just win from there. Like it's an absolute blowout, especially in like the Burning Abyss matchup. Like you just keep this in your hand. You wait for them to fire like you. They fire like you. You're just like, okay, that's fine. You try and like rebuild your board, and you set the climate change. Next time you climate change, grab all your stuff back, and at that stage you have so many resources that you can just OTK your opponent. And it's really insane. And one interesting play I did with climate change was that in the mirror match, in the Qliphort mirror match, basically, I went tribute for disc. I summoned 2 guys off the disc. I played laser. Oh, sorry, it wasn't the mirror match. Sorry, it was against Burning Abyss. It was against a Burning Abyss player. So I tribute summoned for disc, and then I got 2 guys off disc, and then I played laser clip. I summoned a second disc by tributing the other 2 guys I just tributed, and I summoned 2 more guys. My opponent goes karma cut by disc, and so basically he avoids lethal by doing that because I don't have 9k because I used Upside Goblin. At that point, I played climate change to add back the monsters I tributed for disc. I could then complete my pension scale, and then I pendulum the rest of the monsters and attack for game. And that's just one example of a very interesting use of climate change. I had another game where with climate change where it was against a Shadow player and it was game 2, and basically he had resolved, like, I think over the course of the game he resolved like 2 fairy winds or something. Like he resolved a lot of spell trap removal on my scouts, and I just flipped climate change, grabbed 2 of my scouts, grabbed a disc, and then from there on it was pretty much just all downhill. And like I even resolved it the second time that game because I played second climate change in the side deck. And yeah, like climate change is just insane. I feel like in this format, at least, this card really needs to be main decked, and so that's the main deck. So okay, so the first card I played was second climate change, as I previously mentioned. I just feel like the reason you want to be playing more than one climate change after game 2 and 3 is because at that stage it's almost definite that they're gonna have like answers for your scout. They're gonna have things like Fairy Wind, Spell Shattering Arrow, maybe if they're feeling, you know, they're feeling really like terrorist or something, and they could be playing Spell Shattering Arrows, or they could just be playing like a lot of really like random back row hate, like not back, like spell trap removal, like just a lot of hate for spells. You could be playing against like artifacts or something. Like it just have like Molotox or something. Like it's just a lot of like just game 2 and 3. It's just like game 2 and 3. If they set like 2 back row, you can assume one of them is going to be an answer for scout. And the reason, and like the second climate change really helps because it obviously increases the odds of you drawing it, and also like you can always just set it, and then you can just make a huge push. They answer all the cards you played. You play the climate change afterwards, and then you just win. You flat out win after that because they've run out of answers, and you essentially +2'd off the climate change from adding the 3 monsters. So yeah, moving on. I played 3 Shadow Mirrors. Even though like your opponent's citing things like Fairy Wind and stuff that specifically hit like face-up cards like this, Shadow Mirror is still so strong against Shadows and Burning Abyss that it literally doesn't matter. Even if they have outspeed, you still play Shadow Mirror, and the reason is because you flip Shadow Mirror and the deck literally just shuts down. Like against like Burning Abyss, you flip Shadow Mirror, the deck just shuts down. This is essentially soul drain that is also like skill drain against things like Tour Guide and stuff. And in the Shadow matchup, they fuse for a bunch of stuff. You just flip Shadow Mirror and you just brick all the monsters that you just sent, and it's really, really strong. And yeah, so like I don't think I need to explain this too much because literally it's in literally every side deck that isn't like a dark deck right now. So yeah, I played 2 Trapstone. I didn't board this too much, but I felt that it was necessary against Burning Abyss because it obviously answers things like Fire Leg, it answers discard traps, so I felt Trapstone was really important. Once again, like I said, I didn't really board it too much because I feel like the card's only good going first, because drawing this into an established board can be really, really awkward, because obviously in the only matchup you would really side it is Burning Abyss. So like if you're just gonna draw this, set this, and like you don't commit into Fire Lake, then they're probably gonna OTK you next turn anyway. So in that sense, Trapstone's really counterproductive. But when you go first with it, it can be really, really good. Like you just set it, and then you go for your opening. They set up their Fire Lake, and then they try and Fire Lake you next, and you just traps on them, and then you can just OTK off that. And then I only played 3 monsters on my side. I played 3 Maxi because and I only sided this against Burning Abyss. But the reason there's so much stuff for Burning Abyss is because it really is your hardest matchup. Fire Lake is just so real against this deck. Popping a Pendulum Scale, popping things like Scout, just not killing your board. It's just so strong against this deck. So you kind of have to, you really have to prepare for the Burning Abyss matchup. Otherwise, you're not gonna have a nice day. So Maxi is really good because Maxi basically, it's a card similar to Book of Moon where when you play it, you force the Burning Abyss player to stop. Like, let's say you have just like the standard opening of like Kara and attached sacrifice. Normally they would go for something like a Virgil to spin away the sacrifice and kill the guy that you have sacrifice on. Maxi is really good in this scenario because for them to make that play where they get rid of your sacrifice, they have to give you like 2 or more cards depending on like what they're using, and so Maxi just basically helps stop pushes, and furthermore, it also stops them from making like really insane plays, like well, not like insane plays, but like it stops them from making the standard like double Dante play they usually do turn 1. Like they just go like Tour Guide, Graph, and then like more like they just attach Graph and get more stuff. And so because like to get to that board state, they need to special summon like 3 to 4 times. So like the moment you Maxi them, they just stop because they know they can't keep going because they're gonna give you like 3 to 4 cards, and you're playing Qliphorts. So if you get that many extra cards, you can just explode on the field and like instantly win. So yeah. I played, so for spells, I played 3 Monarch Stormforth. Stormforth is, I feel like Stormforth is absolutely necessary in every Qliphort side, mainly because Stormforth absolutely blows out the mirror match, because let's just say that they have a monster, they equip Sacrifice, you just Stormforth that, you can summon something like a Disc or a Shell, and that's just extremely strong, because at that stage, they've lost their monster, you've gotten out one of your strongest monsters, and you can usually OTK after that, because that's an absolutely insane amount of damage that comes out. And yeah, basically Stormforth is mainly just for that matchup. Stormforth is I sometimes side this against Shadows, but not too often. I only side like 1 if I ever sided against Shadows. And the main reason why I don't like siding this over Shadows, even though the obvious upside is that you can Stormforth the set monster. The reason I don't do it is because against Shadow, like the moment you activate Stormforth, because the way Stormforth is worded is that like you activate Stormforth but nothing immediately happens. It's like you activate Stormforth and then your opponent has a chance to respond before you can actually tribute a monster, if you tribute a monster from them. So what they usually do is they usually El Shadow Fusion you if you're gonna go Stormforth, and they resolve a bunch of effects, and I guess you can like also tribute the construct or like whatever they fused off it, but the thing is that at that stage they've already resolved so many effects. Like Stormforth is really just a -1 in that scenario, so I don't really side it in that matchup. And like, it's sometimes okay going a second against Burning Abyss, because if you really feel like you need an out to double Dante, or like just like double Dante, or like not double Dante, or like Dante and like 1 monster and they set Fire Lake, but I usually don't do that because I feel as if just MST and Nightbeam is usually enough to out that board. And besides, I've played the matchup so much that I know exactly how to play around Fire Lakes anyway. So yeah. And the final card I played on my sideboard was Triple Shattering Arrow. I was originally playing 2, but my friend Chris Short basically, like last minute, like pre-registration, he basically convinced me to play 3 because I was playing 2 because I felt like I wanted to play like a third Climate Change in the side deck, but he basically reminded me of like how important Spell Shattering absolutely is in the mirror match, because on that day at that point I felt like Stormforth was mainly enough to win me in the mirror, but after hearing Chris's explanation, he basically explained that the mirror match is just basically all about it's either you making a power play and OTKing your opponent, or it's you stopping your opponent from playing. And that's what Spell Shattering Arrow does in the mirror. The Spell Shattering Arrow basically stops your opponent from playing. And the burn damage of Spell Shattering is extremely relevant, because there are situations where your opponent gets put down to like a K or something, and you can just Spell Shattering for a game. It didn't come up for me, but it's there, and like I did hear that it happened to someone today anyway. So yeah. And I'll just quickly go for the extra deck. It's very relevant, but because I think I made like 1 card from this extra deck the whole day. But so I played number 11 Big Eye. You literally never make it. The way you go into it is if you have 2 discs that are both level 7, and the only way that's possible is if either A, you tribute some both of them, which is like retarded because you would have won the game already, or B, the situation is where you have a skill drain and you have 2 discs, and your opponent somehow kills your skill drain, then you can go for Big Eye because they're obviously both level 7. Oh, and you don't have a scout in your Pendulum Zone as well, so that's just extremely situational. Played One Excite All Night. This card doesn't. I never like I said I never really made anything, but I'll explain why I played it. You play Excite All Night because it's a card that like it's extremely situational when it comes up, but in a scenario where it can possibly come up, it can potentially win the game. Like I actually, the only round I lost in Swiss was round 3, and I lost game 1 in that round simply because my opponent went Excite All Night, and it was the Qliphort mirror match, and he goes Excite All Night, and he forces out my skill drain. And basically, skill drain is absolutely awful in the mirror match because you can't resolve effects like disc or shell, so you can't go for like your big power plays. And so since you're both playing Qliphorts, you're both playing with extremely big monsters, so at that point it's just really, really dumb. So I ended up losing that game because I was like, my life was really low, and he got to the point where he just basically beat me in that game. And I beat him game 2 because of a really insane top deck. I top decked Scout I top decked Scout, I played Upstart Goblin, and then top decked Disc, and that was actually exactly enough for me to go for that game. And then I lost game 3 because I went second. Like, my opponent opened the stones, and I also opened the stones, but he went first, and he set up first.
So these were the only 2 that you played, or we?
No, I've got all these others. So.
Oh no, it's in the only 2 you summoned.
Oh, I never summoned this actually. Okay, I was just explaining what I played. Sorry, I never summoned this either. I will tell you what I did actually summon. So play 1 Revolver Chain because if you ever make it, you put Scout on top. Play this card because it's sometimes good. I did actually make this card once. It's really funny because it was actually a misplay to make this card anyway. So my opponent had Elshad Shekinaga, and I completely forgot that Shekinaga actually had an effect because like Shekinaga doesn't really do anything to your deck because all the effects you're activating are monsters that are normal summon. So it completely slipped my mind that Shekinaga was able to negate the effects of special summon monsters. Like, I know it sounds really, really stupid. So the first card I played was second Climate Change, as I previously mentioned. I just feel like the reason you want to be playing more than 1 Climate Change after game 2 and 3 is because at that stage it's almost definite that they're gonna have like answers for your Scout. They're gonna have things like Pharaoh Wind, Spell Shattering Arrow, maybe if they're feeling, they're feeling really like terrorist or something, and they could be playing Spell Shattering Arrows, or they could just be playing like a lot of really like random back row hate, like not back, like spell trap removal, like just a lot of hate for spells. You could be playing against like artifacts or something, like it just have like Molotovs or something, like it's just a lot of like, just game 2 and 3, there's just like, game 2 and 3, if they set like 2 back row, you can assume one of them is going to be an answer for Scout. And the reason, and like the second Climate Change really helps because it obviously increases the odds of you drawing it, and also like you can always just set it and then you can just make a huge push. They answer all the cards you played. You play the Climate Change afterwards, and then you just win. You flat out win after that because they've run out of answers, and you essentially +2'd off the Climate Change from adding the 3 monsters. So yeah, moving on, I played 3 Shadow Mirrors. Even though like your opponent's citing things like Pharaoh Wind and stuff that specifically hit like face-up cards like this, Shadow Mirror is still so strong against Shadows and Burning Abyss that it literally doesn't matter. Even if they have Outsword, you still play Shadow Mirror, and the reason is because you flip Shadow Mirror and the deck literally just shuts down. Like against like Burning Abyss, you flip Shadow Mirror, the deck just shuts down. This is essentially Soul Drain that is also like skill drain against things like Tour Guide and stuff. And in the Shadow matchup, they fuse for a bunch of stuff. You just flip Shadow Mirror and you just brick all the monsters that you just sent, and it's really, really strong. And yeah, so like I don't think I need to explain this too much because literally it's in literally every side deck that isn't like a dark deck right now. So yeah, I played 2 Trapstone. I didn't board this too much, but I felt that it was necessary against Burning Abyss because it obviously answers things like Fire Leg, it answers discard traps, so I felt Trapstone was really important. Once again, like I said, I didn't really board it too much because I feel like the card's only good going first, because drawing this into an established board can be really, really awkward, because obviously in the only matchup you would really side this Burning Abyss. So like if you're just gonna draw this, set this, and like you don't commit into Fire Lake, then they're probably gonna OTK you next anyway. So in that sense, Trapstone's really counterproductive. But when you go first with it, it can be really, really good. Like you just set it, and then you go for your opening. They set up their Fire Lake, and then they try and Fire Lake you next, and you just traps on them, and then you can just OTK off that. And then I only played 3 monsters on my side. I played 3 Maxi and I only sided this against Burning Abyss. But the reason there's so much stuff for Burning Abyss is because it really is your hardest matchup. Fire Lake is just so real against this deck. Popping a Pendulum Scale, popping things like Scout, just not killing your board. It's just so strong against this deck. So you kind of have to, you really have to prepare for the Burning Abyss matchup. Otherwise, you're not gonna have a nice day. So Maxi is really good because Maxi basically, it's a card similar to Book of Moon, where when you play it, you force the Burning Abyss player to stop. Like let's say you have just like the standard opening of like carrot and attached sacrifice. Normally they would go for something like a Virgil to spin away the sacrifice and kill the guy that you have sacrifice on. Maxi is really, really good in this scenario because for them to make that play where they get rid of your sacrifice, they have to give you like 2 or more cards